Decentralized finance, or DeFi, is a major topic of discussion among financial regulators, and in particular, in the United States and France, there have been published reports analyzing the potential risks that DeFi projects might pose to their respective governments. So with me is Sam Pash. He is the community coordinator for seasonal tokens to talk more about this. So Sam, great to meet you. Great to have you here today.
Thanks very much, Jane.
Why has there been a wider spotlight on decentralized finance? What's happening in this space right now?
In my personal opinion, I don't think DeFi isn't a new thing. It's been around for a fair few years now. But obviously, when you think of crypto, you think of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Those are sort of your main ones. You don't even necessarily know about DeFi. A lot of my retail networks wouldn't even know what DeFi is if I approached them with it a few years ago. But now you're right. If you mention DeFi to somebody, people's ears pick up. They recognize the name a bit more. And I think that's because routinely there's always something that happens that pushes people into crypto. And the next logical step from getting Bitcoin, for example, would be looking into DeFi. And obviously, we saw quite recently with the Silicon Valley Bank run that the bank run it led. Obviously, Bitcoin spiked quite a lot in price out of nowhere, which wasn't really expected during where we are in the markets right now. And I think that is sort of, like I said, a trickle effect has led to more eyes being on DeFi. And just in general, DeFi is much more accessible now than it used to be. When I was first in the space, you'd have to go through loads of documents, you'd have to do a lot of research to figure out how to even buy a product, let alone what it even was. Now, you could tell somebody what it is, and by tomorrow, with a bit of guidance, they'd be in and they'd know roughly what they were doing. So as we move forward, adoption's increasing, but so is the scalability of accessibility, which I think is a massive, key driving force to bringing people in.
And so is the scrutiny, I guess, as something gets bigger. So what are the perceived risks that governments see, that regulators see, that could possibly happen for users?
I think it's not necessarily, there's a few different things, right? So DeFi represents to people an extension of freedom they may not have had with retail markets. If I had an idea right now, and believe me, I have many ideas at all times, I could go into DeFi and I could make something of that idea. And tomorrow I could have people wanting to buy my tokens, trade my tokens, invest in the product I'm trying to create. And it's much more accessible than just having an idea and going to an investor or an angel investor pool and trying to advertise your idea. DeFi is much more accepting of new products and new ideas that come forward, right? And investors are much more willing to take risks because of examples of the past. Some projects go to literally billions of dollars in market cap in very short amounts of time. It turns people into millionaires overnight, right? So that's quite a big draw for people. But from a governmental and regulator point of view, that does pose a risk, Some of these things bleed through and actually affect retail markets. If you look at Terra Luna, for example, they had a stable coin. It was an algorithmic backed stable coin, and they went to $18.6 billion in market cap, I believe. When unfortunately their stable coin depegged, which meant it went to zero, people were losing millions overnight. And that actually does have a massive knock-on effect with retail markets, right? So from a government perspective and a regulatory perspective, yeah, that is a big risk, and that is something they need to look at with a bit more scrutiny and figure out what's going on and why that's happening. And obviously those risks are still present for users. Just like any other market, you're exposed to volatility and risk, even to be honest, even more so in DeFi. So as long as users are aware of that, but the upside potential gains, as it were, quite a lot more than in the retail sector. Just the way it is right now.
Now, there's a lot of talk about central bank digital currencies that, the US central bank may do something, maybe, I think Asia's looking at it. What's your impression of that? How would that affect DeFi?
So if you were to ask anybody in the street in the West, what is a CBDC? You get a pretty 50-50 result. Some people have no idea, and some people have roughly a general gist of an idea. Obviously, it stands for central bank digital currency. It's effectively replacing fiat. It would be, all your cash would be cashless. It would be all digital, which is similar in the same sort of sense as crypto. But if you look at places like Nigeria, for example, they actually already have a CBDC. And to impose their populace to use it, they actually capped withdrawals of US dollars from their banks in fiat to $40 a week. And there's talks of capping bank accounts in the UK to £20,000. So suddenly people can see, hang on a minute, how am I ever meant to get anywhere if I'm being strangleholded by this currency that I don't even fully understand? So risks to people, I think the degree of government overreach could be quite large. They could, impact it across everybody in a major way and have complete autonomy over your funds, which obviously is not what we want. We want freedom of our own money, right? And that's where DeFi comes into it. Yeah. I think people would want more security of their funds than having it controlled by the government.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, what we saw through the pandemic was kind of, some government overreach into people's money that I think you have to think, 5 steps ahead. What could this potentially lead to? So how could investors look into DeFi and possibly remove some of the pressures? What are some options for them? Remove some of the pressures of a central bank digital currency.
Well, you just gave an amazing example, and I want to piggyback off that. And that was the government overreach during the COVID pandemic. You actually saw a massive drive. In fact, probably the biggest drive DeFi has ever had during this time. So we have a direct correspondence there. People don't like government overreach, and they're going to put their money in a safer place when that happens. And that's exactly where we stand now with the CBDCs. I think as governments try and impose more and more control over people are going to want to protect their funds more and more. And that's why we saw Bitcoin go up. That's why we're seeing a DeFi uptick. If you were to look at a decentralized exchange right now in terms of trading volume, there's roughly about 200 plus decentralized exchanges that are quite popular. And there's over $1 billion of trading value a day. That's trading volume backwards and forwards a day in DeFi right now. And we're not at a particularly big bullish sentiment overall. So that's a lot of money. Government's going to try and overextend. People are going to want to protect their money, and then they're going to learn about DeFi. And that's where sort of the regulatory problem comes in, because more and more money is being pushed away from the traditional systems into a system that isn't even fully regulated. And that's where potential risks start to arise as well.
Yeah, well, these are really interesting times to be living
So,
when
yeah.
you think through things. Now, how does seasonal tokens, how does the ecosystem there work within the DeFi space?
So I love seasonal tokens, and I love DeFi. I've been as community coordinator in seasonal tokens since nearly the inception of the product. And I personally believe it represents basically the pinnacle of the potential that DeFi has, right? So Bitcoin has a halving every 4 years. And that means the rate of supply that can be created and mined is cut in half, while the demand in theory should be going up. So the tokens are harder to get, which means the price goes up because the supply is cut. Seasonal tokens is exactly the same thing, but they're 4 unique tokens within decentralized finance on the Ethereum blockchain. For example, we have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And every 9 months, one of those tokens will go through a halving event. We had spring about 10 months ago, and we just had summer. And when spring halved, as we predicted, supply was cut, but demand went up. So the price went up. And now we've had summer, exactly the same thing's happened again. So what this actually allows investors and traders to do is you can trade tokens for more tokens within this cyclical pattern, as the prices will be oscillating around one another. And it actually allows even speculators and traders to consistently increase their their token holding over a long period of time. And because supply is continually being cut every 9 months over all 4 tokens, you're consistently making more and more tokens, and the prices will be going up and up and up, because again, demand and supply. Yeah. So to me, that is pretty much the pinnacle of safe DeFi.
And it mitigates the risk too with
in a massive way. Yeah.
So explain how the risks can be lessened.
Well, I want to look into the general scope of DeFi. So imagine I came up to you in the street and I had an idea and you liked it and you put $5,000 into it. You'd be investing into my idea and my startup idea. But if that collapsed in the retail market, you'd probably be expecting your money back, or a lot of things would happen. There'd be legal proceedings. DeFi doesn't necessarily have that. Anybody could have an idea in DeFi and make it reality tomorrow. And then there's no safeguards, particularly over your funds. So what I tell everybody is knowledge is power. The more you know about DeFi and the way the contracts work, the safer you will become passively. Most DeFi projects have a transparent contract, which actually runs the project in the background. It's called a smart contract. And if you know what you're reading, you can see if there's anything malicious within the code that could potentially risk your money. So that's one big thing. Knowledge is power. But there are also many auditing companies out there which will obviously review a smart contract, review a product and platform, make sure it's safe, give it a stamp of approval. So that's a baseline risk. I mean, there are scams prevalent in DeFi, but that removes that aspect of it to an extent. But then also you have risks such as stablecoins decoupling or depegging. So we mentioned Terra Luna earlier. UST went down to 0 pretty much. USDC quite recently, which is a stablecoin backed by the dollar, effectively the dollar price, that went down to 0.8 rather than 1, which was massive overnight. So you are actually exposed to more risk in DeFi than you would necessarily be in retail markets. But again, you have that safety net of your own autonomy over your own money, and that is power. So for most people, I would just say, do your research, learn about DeFi, learn about the technicalities behind it, look into audits and audit companies, and just make sure what you invest in is safe ultimately.
Yeah. All right, Sam, thank you so much for all your thoughts and advice about DeFi.
Thank you very much, Jane.